Mosaic, a daily news program from Worldlink TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Peace be upon you and welcome to the News in Brief. Colin Powell dismisses Israel's negativity to the roadmap. He urges Palestinians and Israelis to work toward implementing the roadmap little by little in order to discuss more challenging issues which are hindering the peace process in the Middle East. Now, to our correspondent in Cairo, Tariq El-Shami.
The U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell urged Cairo to step up their efforts and persuade the armed Palestinian factions who will be meeting in Cairo in the coming weeks to disarm and end the violence. Meanwhile, Cairo demanded from the U.S. Secretary that Israel must take similar positive steps to implement the roadmap.
Iran's President Khatami is on an official visit to Lebanon, the first visit by an Iranian leader in a quarter of a century. The visit comes amid criticism of Iranian-backed Hezbollah. Now to our correspondent in Beirut, Rafiq Nasrallah.
Iran's President Mohammad Khatami is on an unusual visit to Lebanon. One of the main purposes of this visit is to state their position on Hezbollah's role in southern Lebanon and to define their position on the roadmap through an Iranian-Lebanese statement. Later on, he will visit Syria.
Tens of thousands of Iraqis welcome back head of the High Islamic Revolutionary Council, Ayatollah Muhammad Zafar al-Hakim, in the holy city of Najaf. Al-Hakim has been in exile in Iran for the past 23 years. 40 people were killed when a truck exploded near a government building north of the Chechen capital, Grozny. Iraqi tribal leaders held a public conference in Baghdad to discuss their demands, reiterating that they don't belong to any political party and warning the Americans of a million-person march if the U.S. does not comply with their demands. Now, to our correspondent in Baghdad, Hamza Hussein.
The
conference of the National Union of Iraqi Tribal Leaders concluded after the attendees reiterated that they don't belong to any political party. The arguments were fierce, and there were conflicting views at the meeting. However, in their statement, they called for the need to remain neutral and concentrate on the poor living conditions in Iraq. It is time to provide support via food coupons, which the individual citizens heavily rely on. The coupons will include basic staples. To delay these coupons or cancel them altogether will create many hardships. Some of the leaders wanted to recognize those who participated in the overthrow of the previous regime, adding that the U.S. must take responsibility for Iraq's oil without the presence of an Iraqi government. Who gave the coalition forces the authority to export Iraq's oil? Was it a national government? Was that included in the statement? Some of the participants sent a message to Kuwait, asking them to stop protecting people igniting fires in Iraq. They must stop their people and their army from burning Iraqi ministry buildings, warehouses, and city buildings. Some people reported witnessing these actions, but to be honest, I did not see them. Other leaders stressed the importance of negotiating with the U.S. forces regarding the current Iraqi conditions. Otherwise, they will organize a million-person march. Iraq is a tribal society. Thus, this tribal conference will have a great effect on Iraqi public opinion. This was an initial tribal conference, however. It will be the basis for an effective force in the Iraqi society. They know very well the direction they will take before taking any steps. Hamza Hussein, Abu Dhabi TV, Baghdad.
The first human rights organization is being established in Baghdad. The organization is now documenting violations of the Iraqis' rights, whether during the previous regime or even before that. The Iraqis hope that documenting these violations will return some of their rights.
The Human Rights Organization was finally able to work and launch its projects. Previously, it was pushed to the side, watching human rights being violated in front of them. Punishments used to vary. They included executions, slicing of the ears, and cutting off the hands. This organization does not provide financial aid. Rather, it documents violations to Iraqi individuals, hoping to compensate them in the future. Thus, many committees were formed, and they will collaborate among themselves. There will be health and media committees, as well as committees for prisoners of war and missing people.
We are combing the ground searching for the truth and investigating violations to the Geneva Conventions, specifically Article 4.
The building was crowded with people who wanted to hang on to the last glimmer of hope after all these years of corruption. This woman came to ask for help after they found a cluster bomb in her home.
We were away, and when we came back home, they told us that there was a cluster bomb in our house. We could see the bomb from a distance.
This woman is looking for her 3 children who have been missing since 1991. She sat down, all broken-hearted, waiting to document their names. These lists include thousands of names of people who are missing or who have been executed.
This says that he was executed for theft. This was the only country to sentence people to death for theft.
There are so many files, and people are doubting the organization's ability since it is a small agency. Evidence of the property damage is supported with photographs. Furthermore, the organization discovered that expired medicine arrived in Iraq in the form of medical aid. The Human Rights Organization is challenged by the overwhelming feeling of chaos. However, it is directed by people who have lost many things, and they remain hopeful in order to survive. Hamza Hussein, Abu Dhabi Television, Baghdad.
In
the wake of the destructive war in Iraq, many Iraqis find themselves living in tragic conditions. One Iraqi father is calling for help for all of those that were left homeless by the war. Just 1 month ago, Abdul Hussein Hassan used to own a restaurant in Baghdad, but now he and his family are living in an abandoned military installation, to be more specific, in a locker room. The man and his family live in this new place after their home was destroyed by an American airstrike at the beginning of the war in Iraq. They lost their family home, in addition to a private restaurant which was their only source of income. Now the family lives in extremely miserable conditions.
My children sleep here, I sleep here, and my wife sleeps there. We collected the remains of our destroyed property, what you see here. Of course, our home is not healthy. To tell you the truth, we no longer have a home. Our home was destroyed by the airstrikes, and we had to come and live here. We urgently need help. We do not have water, we do not have food, we spend all our savings. We want Bush and Blair to know we do not have food, water, medicine, or clothes. We have nothing. We even no longer have our home. We are living in the middle of nowhere.
President Hosni Mubarak discussed post-war Iraq and the roadmap for Middle East peace during talks with U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell in Cairo this morning. Powell was in Egypt after weekend meetings with Palestinian and Israeli leaders on the internationally backed peace plan. The Palestinians have accepted the roadmap as it is, dropping their reservations. But Israel has listed 15 reservations and never officially accepted the roadmap, which calls, among other things, for a freeze of Jewish settlements, which Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon refuses to dismantle. However, the U.S. Secretary of State told Nile TV in an exclusive interview that the Jewish settlements should end and outposts must go.
This issue has always been a problem. The United States position is clear. We want to see settlement activity ended. The outpost will have to go. The issue of settlements that are already there now and might, in the view of some, make it difficult to create a Palestinian state in a contiguous, sensible way, those will have to be dealt with as we go down the road, with the two sides talking to one another as we define the elements of a provisional state and the elements of a final state. But our position right now is that settlement activity should end, the outposts have to go, and then those settlements that are already there, how we deal with that as we go forward is an issue. We're talking about people who live there with their families and have lived there in some cases for more than one generation. So it is not just a simple matter of saying settlement be gone. It's going to have to be a subject of intense conversation between the two sides with the assistance of the United States and other members of the international community.
As for Powell's talks in Cairo this morning, we have the details with Nihal Saad.
With little to show for his efforts with Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell held talks with President Hosni Mubarak here in Cairo. Stressing that the roadmap should be accepted by both sides, Powell said, however, the Israelis did not use the word accept.
Thank you. This is Nihal Saad for Nile TV, the Egyptian television. Secretary Powell, we heard it loud and clear from the Palestinian side, from Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, that the Palestinians accept the roadmap as it is without reservations. Did you get the same response from the Israeli side? Thank you.
The Israeli side did not use the word accept. The Israeli side has made it clear over the months that they had some comments with respect to the roadmap. But the roadmap, as it was finished in December, is a roadmap that was released a few weeks ago. So we will listen to additional Israeli comments that might come forward. But more importantly, it's important for the Israelis to talk directly to the Palestinians, which they will have the opportunity to do, and vice versa in the very near future, to see what differences exist and see how those differences can be bridged between the parties with the assistance of the United States and the other quartet members. And so rather than focus on that particular issue, I am focusing on, and I think appropriately so, on the steps that we can take. It makes no difference whether you have a word accept or not have the word accept. What makes a difference is whether or not both sides find enough in common with the roadmap that they can begin the process of moving down this road. If we don't get started now on issues related to security, on issues related to going after terrorists and terrorism, on improving the lives of the Palestinian people by granting access in the territories again, making it easier for the Palestinian people to get back and forth to the workplace, making it easier for them to start to restore their basic lives again and to pursue their lives. If we don't get started on these issues, we will never reach the point where we can deal with these more difficult issues that are on the path ahead.
But Foreign Minister Ahmed Meher, disagreeing with the U.S. assessment as Powell stood by him, urged Israel to spell out its acceptance of the roadmap.
And I think comment on what the Secretary said. I appreciate what he said, that it is important to move forward. But it seems to me a little strange that if you are willing to do things, you are not ready to say that you are willing to do that. I think the word accept is not a very difficult word to pronounce, and we certainly would hope that both sides, the Palestinians have already done so. It is important for both sides to indicate at least their intention to implement what's in the roadmap.
Powell stressed he expected Prime Minister Sharon to take steps soon that could constitute the beginning of the roadmap process. Powell's best efforts to sound upbeat by repeating that the situation was ripe for an immediate implementation appeared to be wishful thinking on the part of the U.S. administration. The Palestinians have accepted the roadmap as it is, dropping down their reservations. But Israel listed 15 observations which Prime Minister Sharon intends to bring up when he visits Washington on the 20th of May. The U.S. top diplomat, while stressing that the new Iraqi government should be representative of all the Iraqi elements, warned that the emergence of an Islamist government in Iraq would not be in the best interest of the Iraqi people or its neighbors.
With respect to Iraq, I believe that our commitment is for an Iraqi government to be created that is representative of all the people of Iraq, and that all the different elements of the Iraqi population get to participate in it. I think it would be unfortunate if a government arose that is so fundamentalist in nature that it didn't respect basic principles of democracy or did not respect the rights of all of the people of Iraq. And I think that's what Secretary Rumsfeld was referring to, and certainly our point of view. So what we are trying to do is to hold meetings around the country, make sure that we develop leaders who come up and represent all elements of the population, and that they will put in place the kind of government that the Iraqi people will be proud of. But ultimately, it will be the Iraqi people who make this judgment. And I think that we can help them make a judgment that will bring them into a form of government that is democratic, but yet is respectful of the faith of the people, the Islamic faith. And I don't think Don Rumsfeld was suggesting in any way that we should be disrespectful of Islam. It's just that if you bring into being a fundamentalist regime that does not have democratic elements to it, but just fundamentalism as its driving political force, this would not be in the best interest of the Iraqi people or of its neighbors.
Powell has been on a tour of the region to push the Palestinians and the Israelis to implement a three-phased blueprint of peace drafted by the United Nations, the United States, the EU, Russia.
Iranian President Mohammad Khatami arrived in Beirut, starting a landmark three-day visit, the first by an Iranian head of state since Tehran's 1979 Islamic Revolution. Tens of thousands of Lebanese lined on the airport road to welcome the Iranian president. It took more than an hour to cover the 7 kilometers from the airport to the seafront hotel where Khatami and his 120-member delegation were staying. Khatami is also to travel on to Syria, Yemen and Bahrain in a trip that comes as Iran, Lebanon and Syria face strong US pressure to hold support for resistance groups, including Hezbollah in Lebanon.
It is the first visit by an Iranian president to Lebanon since the Islamic Revolution toppled the Shah's rule in Iran in 1979. Sayyid Mohammad Khatami, in his second round in office, chose Lebanon to be the first country on his tour that would take him later to Syria, Yemen and Bahrain. Thousands of people, old and young, men and women, all lined up at Beirut International Airport's runway, held posters of both Sayyid Mohammad Khatami and Lebanese President Emil Lahoud to welcome the visiting president. Iranian, Lebanese and Hezbollah flags were hoisted up in the air, a clear indication of the joint relationship that both countries enjoy. This visit comes to stress on this strong relationship as well as the countries' joint view on regional issues. Upon his arrival, Sayyid Khatami was welcomed by President Lahoud, Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri, other senior political figures and ambassadors amid tight security measures. Sayyid Khatami hailed the massive gathering, but he chose to do that while walking and not in the car. Slogans of welcome were voiced high as he neared from the masses. Lahoud had told IRNA, Iran's official news agency, that Beirut and Tehran see eye to eye many issues, including the right of sovereignty and support for a multipolar world, because American hegemony would certainly throw the entire world into chaos, as he said. Analysts say that Khatami's visit is mainly to discuss post-war Iraq and the so-called peace process in the Middle East. They say that the Iranian president wants to unite views on the post-war Iraq in his tour and to discuss the roadmap outlined by the quartet. Khatami is expected to focus on the importance of cooperation between Lebanon, Syria and Iran, the three countries that the United States is pressuring to accept its occupation on Iraq and to stop their support of resistance groups, including Hezbollah, a Lebanese movement that drove the Israeli occupation out of southern Lebanon in 2000. Analysts say the Iranian president would recommend that the UN play a role in Iraq, while stressing that his country is not planning to have a role in the war-ravaged country, but yet it backs the people's choice. Khatami's motorcade drove through tens of thousands of people lining the route before taking him to the seafront Phoenicia Hotel, where he and his 120-member delegation were staying. Lahoud told IRNA, quote, "The recent changes in the region oblige us not only to consult each other, but also to act to confront their consequences while sticking to our rights and our positions," unquote. He said that Khatami's visit and the subjects that will be discussed will be extremely serious so that we can face up to unacceptable pressures and solutions, in reference to U.S. demands clearly made during U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell's visit to Lebanon last week. Lahoud had expressed his country's appreciation of Iran's support for Lebanon during its struggle for liberation in the south. Accompanying Iranian ministers and their Lebanese counterparts are also due to sign one accord for an Iranian loan of $50 million for Lebanese infrastructure projects and another for boosting trade. The two sides are expected to sign a number of important accords during the visit. These will involve cooperation on environmental issues, customs administration, youth and sports, as well as the beginning of trade negotiations between the two countries and a pact on women's affairs. Sayyid Khatami's first visit to Lebanon comes at a crucial time. Lebanon and Iran are facing up U.S. pressure to adapt to the current changes. This, however, seems to stress that both countries are deeply involved politically, economically and culturally. Ala Makki, Manar Channel, Beirut International Airport.
Iranian President Sayyid Mohammad Khatami, a man of politics and letters, became the head of the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1997. He was re-elected for a second term in 2001, and Sayyid Khatami is known for his theory of dialogue of civilizations adopted by the United Nations. More about the life of the Iranian president in this report.
Brought up in a religious family, as son of Ayatollah Sayyid Ruhollah Khatami, the current Iranian president Sayyid Mohammad Khatami is acquainted with both worldly and divine studies. He further reigns politics on both the theoretical and practical levels. For 6 years, Sayyid Khatami studied in the theological school or Hawza in the Iranian holy city of Qom, where he had his advanced religious studies. He was a student of the great philosopher Martyr Murtada Mutahhiri and Ayatollah Jawadi Amili. Simultaneously, Sayyid Khatami completed his philosophical studies in Isfahan University and obtained a master's degree in education from Tehran University. Mastering English, French, and Arabic, along with the Persian language, Sayyid Khatami taught political thought for master's students. The Iranian president efficiently partook in the Iranian public revolutionary struggle activities on the level of the Hawza and the university, aiming at establishing the Islamic Republic. Sayyid Khatami occupied several senior posts. He represented his region, Ardakan, in the first session of the Islamic Shura Council and headed the Islamic Center in Hamburg in Germany. He also presided Kayhan Institute as a representative of late Imam Khomeini, who used to refer to Sayyid Khatami as, quote, his virtuous, pious son. Later, Sayyid Khatami became Education and Orientation Minister under Premier Hussein Mousawi and Sheikh Hashemi Rafsanjani, while he acted as a presidential counselor during the rule of the latter. Before being elected as head of the Islamic Republic in 1997, Sayyid Khatami was the educational member of the Supreme Revolutionary Council, pursuant to a resolution issued by Muslim Supreme Leader Sayyid Ali Khamenei and the head of the National Library. During that time, he visited Lebanon for the first time. He was re-elected as president for the second and last term in 2001. Sayyid Khatami had several publications, the most prominent of which are The City of Politics, The Cultural Prospect in Iran, and Religion and Thought in the Trap of Autocracy. He also had many articles and lectures published in Iranian, Arabic, and foreign newspapers and magazines. Sayyid Khatami is known for his approaches of change and his focus on the trivalence of religion, freedom, and law. He put the theory of dialogue of civilizations adopted by the United Nations as an alternative of the U.S. theory of clashes of civilizations.
His Majesty King Abdullah stressed that it was high time to implement the roadmap for peace between the Palestinians and Israel and the establishment of a Palestinian state within 3 years. The king made the remarks during talks at Beit al-Barakah Palace with U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell. His Majesty told Powell that U.S. President George W. Bush's commitment to a Palestinian statehood in 3 years represents an incentive for all parties to reach a just and comprehensive peace in 3 years. The king pointed out that the roadmap should be implemented as a whole package and not on a selective basis. His Majesty described efforts underway to reactivate peacemaking in the region as positive and that it provides an opportunity to achieve peace based on UN resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. In southern Gaza Strip, hundreds of Palestinians have marched in the funeral of 2 Palestinian activists who were shot dead by Israeli troops early today. The killings occurred during an overnight Israeli army incursion into the Rafah refugee camp that ended at dawn. The army claimed that the 2 were spotted trying to plant a bomb in the way of an Israeli tank. During the raid into Rafah, Israeli bulldozers razed 1 house and partially destroyed 4 others. The Israeli forces also teared down 8 acres of olive grove before pulling out. Meanwhile, the Israeli army reinstated a ban on Palestinian travel in and out of the Gaza Strip, effectively freezing the Jewish state's decision yesterday to allow Gaza laborers to travel in and out. It was not immediately clear how long the ban would stay in effect. Israel sealed off the West Bank and Gaza after Palestinians began their uprising for statehood in late 2000. The new U.S. civilian administrator for Iraq, Paul Bremer, has arrived in the southern city of Basra to take over reconstruction and political rehabilitation in the country. Bremer said he was delighted to begin helping set the country on a democratic course. Bremer's appointment was part of a shakeup in the U.S. post-war team in Iraq and continuing frustration over its efforts to restore essential public services and stability to the country. He flew in with General Richard Myers, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Jay Garner, the retired general Bremer has replaced as a senior U.S. civilian in Iraq. 61-year-old Bremer is a former assistant to former U.S. Secretaries of State William Rogers and Henry Kissinger. He was ambassador at large for counterterrorism from 1986 to 1989 and served as U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands. Bremer dismissed accusations that the U.S. troops are in Iraq to colonize it.
The coalition forces did not come to colonize Iraq. We came to overthrow a despotic regime. That we've done. Now our job is to turn and help the Iraqi people regain control of their own destiny, to help the Iraqi society rebuild on the basis of individual liberties, respect for the rule of law, and respect for each other. That's our job now. We're not here to be a colonial power. We're here to help turn over as quickly as we can efficiently do it to the Iraqi people, their country.
One of Iraq's top Shiite clerics, Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim, has arrived in his hometown of al-Najaf, where he was welcomed by thousands of supporters. Hakim's triumphant return to Iraq signals a jostling for position by the influential cleric who was jailed and tortured in the 1970s for opposing Saddam Hussein. Meanwhile, in Baghdad, hundreds of former Iraqi soldiers have staged a demonstration in the center of Baghdad demanding to be paid and allowed back to work. The soldiers, mostly regular Iraqi troops, marched to the U.S. headquarters in Baghdad, waving banners and chanting slogans, demanding that their units are employed to help restore law and order in the country. The soldiers demanded back pay and said they wanted a role in the future of Iraq. The Office of the Reconstruction and Humanitarian Assistance, the U.S.-led post-war administration, has been training Iraqi police force to oversee security, law and order in the country rather than military staff.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,